Day 1. The emergency sirens didn't fade out. They were violently, abruptly severed. One moment, the sprawling metropolis was screaming in absolute chaotic panic. And the next, a suffocating, heavy quiet descended upon the concrete. You are sitting on the cold linoleum of your fourth-floor kitchen. The barricade against the front entrance, a solid oak dining table bolted directly into the drywall with 3-inch structural wood screws, feels laughably inadequate. Through the slatted blinds, the skyline is choked with thick, oily columns of black smoke. The military quarantine collapsed before midnight. Broadcasters told everyone to stay indoors and wait for rescue. They lied. Staying inside simply packaged the meals for the slaughter. The real terror of the first 24 hours isn't what is happening inside your apartment. It's what you hear happening outside. The screams from the streets down below don't sound human. They sound like animals being torn apart in an industrial slaughterhouse. You hear the wet, heavy thuds against the walls of the complex. You hear your neighbors, the people you used to wave to in the hallway, begging for their lives, scratching at your door, pleading for you to let them in. And you sit there on the floor, your hands clamped over your ears, doing the most cowardly, survival-driven thing a human being can do. Absolutely nothing. You let them die. That is your very first lesson. Empathy is a lethal liability.
Day 4. The electrical grid finally fails. It happens at 3:14 a.m. The persistent, comforting hum of the refrigerator shudders and dies, plunging the apartment into a profound, suffocating blackness. Without ambient light pollution from the city, the darkness is absolute. You spend hours sitting in the corner, clutching a heavy steel crowbar, your eyes straining so hard to find shapes in the dark that you begin to hallucinate geometric patterns. The food in the fridge will spoil within 48 hours. You spend the daylight hours gorging on perishable meats, forcing down cold chicken and melting cheese until you feel violently sick. The digestion process uses up water, a miscalculation you instantly regret. The toilet won't flush. The air in the confined space begins to sour. Day 12. The municipal water supply goes dry. When you turn the kitchen faucet, the copper pipes violently shudder, spitting out a thick, rusty brown sludge before hissing empty. Hydration rapidly becomes an agonizing, all-consuming obsession. Thirst transforms into a physical entity clawing at the back of your throat. It feels like coarse sandpaper wrapped in dry leather. You drain the porcelain toilet tank. You boil the foul, stagnant liquid from the bottom of the water heater using a single unscented candle. You lick the morning condensation off the cold window panes just to soothe your cracked, bleeding lips. Hunger makes a body lethargic, but profound dehydration induces waking nightmares. The shadows in your living room start to stretch and writhe. You realize that starving to death in a locked box is a pathetic way to die. You have to breach the threshold. Day 15. You prepare to leave the apartment. You wrap your forearms in thick, glossy magazines, binding them tightly with silver duct tape to create makeshift bite-proof armor. You grip the crowbar, your knuckles white. You slowly unlock the deadbolt, wincing at the metallic click that echoes like a gunshot in the silent hallway. You push the door open. The stench hits you like a physical, suffocating blow, a thick, sweet, coppery wave of mass decay. The corridor is a slaughterhouse. Bloody drag marks smear across the faded carpet, leading toward the stairwell. Emergency sprinkler water drips methodically from the ceiling. A heavily armored riot police officer is slumped against the wall, his helmet cracked open, dark blood pooling beneath his tactical vest. You strip his body,
taking his heavy boots, a half-empty canteen, and a serrated combat knife. You don't look at his face.
Day 21. Down on the street level, the asphalt is a graveyard of abandoned sedans, scattered luggage, and shattered glass. The city is overgrown, quiet, and terrifyingly still. The anomalies, the infected, are not the slow, shuffling corpses from old cinema. They are apex predators. The virus didn't kill them. It hijacked their central nervous system, stripping away their pain receptors and cranking their metabolism into a relentless, burning furnace. They are blind, their eyes clouded over with a milky white film, but their auditory cortex is hyper-tuned. You quickly learn that sound is the ultimate currency of death. You step on a single piece of shattered glass, and 3 streets away, a dozen heads snap instantly in your direction. You learn to move like a ghost. You wrap your stolen police boots in layers of soft rags. You breathe strictly through your nose, keeping your jaw clamped shut to muffle the sound of your own expanding lungs. Day 28. You secure your first kill. Scavenging a ransacked pharmacy, stepping over the hollowed-out remains of the people who got there first, you find half a bottle of broad-spectrum antibiotics. As you turn to leave, you hear it. The wet, rhythmic tearing of meat. Behind the shattered pharmacy counter, a twitching, gray-skinned nightmare is hunched over a fresh corpse. You don't run. Running triggers their predatory chase instinct. You grip the combat knife. You creep up behind the creature, perfectly timing your footsteps with its loud, guttural feeding sounds. You drive the serrated blade directly through the base of its skull, severing the brainstem, and lower its violently spasming body silently to the linoleum floor. You pull the blade out. Thick, black, tar-like blood coats the steel. You don't feel sick. You feel a terrifying surge of absolute power. Day 36. A horrifying truth solidifies in your mind. The dead are entirely predictable, operating strictly on biological instinct. But the surviving humans are absolute malicious chaos. While exploring a dimly lit grocery store basement, your rag-wrapped boot stops precisely 2 millimeters away from a taut piece of transparent fishing line. You follow the wire into the shadows and find it rigged to a cluster of rusty nail bombs hidden behind a pallet of canned peaches. The infected don't build explosives. Later that week, from the high safety of a rusted fire escape, you watch a trio of heavily armored survivors drag a screaming, uninfected man into an intersection. They brutally slice his hamstring with a machete and leave him bleeding on the asphalt, using his desperate screams as a bloody acoustic decoy to draw a wandering horde away from a hardware store they want to loot. You realize the living will slit your throat for half a box of matches. Day 45. Paranoia becomes your most trusted companion. You abandon the apartment and establish a secondary sanctuary in the maintenance catwalks of an abandoned theater. When a terrified, exhausted teenager knocks on the barricaded lobby doors one night, begging through the glass to share your fire, you do not offer him a blanket. You rack the slide of a salvaged 9mm pistol and tell him he has exactly 10 seconds to disappear back into the dark before you shoot him through the glass. You watch his face crumble into despair before he sprints into the rain. 2 hours later, you hear his dying screams a block away. You do not flinch. Compassion is a suicide pact. Relentless, calculated cruelty keeps your pulse steady. Day 52. Winter arrives without mercy. The temperature plummets well below zero, bringing a brutal, freezing reprieve. The drastic cold violently slows the infected down. The viscous fluid in their joints freezes solid, turning them into grotesque ice sculptures that litter the sidewalks, trapped mid-stride by the frost. But this frozen sanctuary is a vicious double-edged sword. Hypothermia continuously gnaws at your extremities. Your fingers turn a bruised, sickly purple, rendering the simple act of striking a match or pulling a trigger nearly impossible. You try to light a small fire in a metal trash can using broken theater seats, but the thin column of gray smoke rising from the roof acts as a highly visible beacon for desperate raiders miles away. You are forced to extinguish the flames. You trade the immediate threat of being hunted by the dead for the slow, agonizing embrace of freezing to death in a lightless room wrapped in moldy velvet curtains.
Day 60. Driven underground to escape a deadly howling blizzard, you navigate the pitch-black subterranean subway network. Down here in the absolute dark, the pathogen has adapted. Without sunlight or fresh meat to consume, the infected didn't simply starve. They rooted themselves into the damp concrete walls. Their bodies swelled and burst open, fusing with the infrastructure to cultivate massive bioluminescent fungal pods. The subterranean air is incredibly thick with yellow, toxic drifting spores. You strap on a cracked military-grade gas mask you stripped off a corpse weeks ago, listening to your own desperate mechanical breathing echoing in the enclosed space. A single torn carbon filter means your lungs will instantly blossom into a botanical nightmare. Down here, the stalkers hunt. They are a new mutation. Agile, silent, crawling along the ceilings like massive insects. You survive only by dragging yourself on your stomach through narrow, claustrophobic ventilation shafts covered in rat filth, too terrified to even blink.
Day 71. You make a fatal miscalculation. While dropping from a ventilation grate into a subterranean maintenance room, a feral stalker lunges from the shadows. Its movements are impossibly fast, a blur of gray muscle and snapping teeth. You manage to swing the heavy steel crowbar, crushing its skull inward with a sickening crunch, but not before its jagged, bone-exposed fingernails tear fiercely through your heavy canvas jacket. The physical damage is a shallow gash on your left forearm, but the biological consequence is catastrophic. Within minutes, pitch-black veins begin spiderwebbing upward beneath your skin, racing aggressively toward your heart. Day 72. The fever hits like a freight train. Your vision blurs, the edges of reality warping into a dizzying, color-distorted nightmare. Your temperature spikes to delirious heights. You stumble into an abandoned subway utility closet and lock the heavy steel door. There are no hospitals left in the world. There is no synthesized cure. There is only a small propane blowtorch, a sterilized hatchet, and a heavy leather belt gripped tightly between your bleeding teeth. You apply the tourniquet just below your elbow, pulling it so tight the leather groans. You raise the blade with your right hand. You sever the infected limb yourself. The sheer agony eclipses your consciousness, the sickening crunch of your own bone ringing in your ears. You drop the hatchet, grab the hissing blowtorch, and sear the spurting stump. The smell of your own burning flesh fills the tiny room. You pass out in a massive pool of your own blood, welcoming the dark void. Day 85. Against all physiological odds, you wake up. The fever broke. You are missing your left arm from the elbow down. Your body is an emaciated tapestry of scars, but you are miraculously still breathing. You drink the remaining drops of water from your canteen, your throat clicking. However, the concrete ground beneath you is vibrating violently. It feels like a localized earthquake. Dragging your battered, off-balance frame out of the subway and up to a high rooftop edge, you witness the Great Migration. Millions of them. A horizon-to-horizon ocean of shifting, rotting mass moving relentlessly through the valley below.
It looks like a gray river of death, a biblical plague washing over the ruined asphalt. They are drawn by a massive, low-frequency acoustic beacon echoing from a distant western ridge. The government didn't vanish. They simply retreated and built a heavily fortified perimeter. And the endless horde is heading directly toward it. Day 90. You spend 5 days tracking the edge of the horde, moving parallel to the swarm across the rooftops. The noise is deafening, a collective wet shuffling of millions of feet mixed with guttural, clicking moans. You find a shattered military transport vehicle crashed on an overpass. Inside, the radio operator is dead, but his comms unit is still drawing solar power. You switch it on. An automated extraction broadcast plays on a continuous looping emergency frequency. The voice is clean, clinical, and completely devoid of emotion. The final transport helicopters will permanently abandon the Western Quarantine Zone on day 100 at sunrise. No further rescue operations will be attempted. May God have mercy on whoever is left. Day 94. You map the route. The evacuation helipads are located entirely on the opposite side of the migration path. The military intentionally positioned the acoustic beacons to draw the swarm away from the interior of the country, using the quarantine zone as a sacrificial meat grinder. Stealth is no longer a viable option. There are no shadows left to hide within. To reach the transport, you are going to have to run straight through the densest part of hell. You spend the next few days resting, eating every scrap of food you have left to build energy. You practice maintaining your balance with only one arm. You are a ghost preparing to become a demon. Day 99. You spend your final 24 hours preparing for absolute war. You inject your last salvaged vial of military-grade epinephrine into your thigh, completely ignoring the phantom pain radiating from your missing left arm. You strap a makeshift incendiary explosive, crafted from fertilizer, diesel, and a road flare, to your chest as a final lethal insurance policy. You will not be eaten alive. You take a heavy steel chain from a tow truck and wrap it tightly around your remaining right hand, locking a heavy brass padlock over your knuckles. You find a spiked baseball bat in a sporting goods store and wedge it into the chain. You stand on the edge of the overpass, looking down at the churning ocean of infected. Tomorrow, you either fly away or you burn. Day 100. The sun breaks over the ruined skyline, casting long, bloody streaks of orange light across the city. The deafening roar of massive twin rotors echoes in the distance. The choppers are spooling up. You kick the rooftop barricade down and charge directly into the dense periphery of the swarm. It is pure, unadulterated, blinding chaos. The epinephrine floods your central nervous system, suppressing all physical agony. You swing the spiked bat with brutal, calculated desperation, shattering brittle skulls, crushing rib cages, wading through a suffocating sea of grasping, tearing hands. The air is thick with black blood, flying teeth, and deafening roars. Claws rake across your back, hands grab at your boots. You stomp, you crush, you bite. You become a whirlwind of pure kinetic destruction. Ammunition spent, your wooden weapon shattered into splinters, you use the brass padlock to punch through the face of a massive infected blocking your path. You break through the tree line. You claw your way over the final barbed wire perimeter fence, the razor wire slicing deep into your thighs. You hit the concrete on the other side just as the massive military Chinook helicopter begins to lift off the tarmac. A soldier, encased in heavy, pristine, yellow hazmat armor, rushes forward. He grabs you by the collar of your shredded jacket, hauling your bleeding, exhausted body onto the cold steel ramp, while the massive horde crashes violently against the reinforced chain-link gates below like a tidal wave of flesh. The metal fence bulges inward under the weight of thousands of bodies. As the chopper rapidly ascends into the gray clouds, leaving the nightmare behind, you collapse against the bulkhead. You look up at the soldier. He isn't looking at you with relief. He isn't offering a comforting hand. He has his assault rifle raised, his finger trembling on the trigger, looking at you with potent, undeniable terror. You slowly turn your head and catch your own reflection in the scratched acrylic window of the helicopter bay. You see an emaciated, deeply scarred survivor. Your face is hollow, covered in thick layers of black gore. Your eyes are cold, entirely dead, devoid of any recognizable human emotion. You survived exactly 100 days, but the terrified, hopeful, empathetic person who locked that apartment door on day 1 didn't make it out. They died a long, long time ago. You are the apex predator now. You are the monster.